Good afternoon. It's good to be here, and thank you for being here this afternoon for this panel presentation and discussion. I'd like to begin, first of all, by welcoming all of you participants here on this session on Nigeria. And I'd like to give just a brief overview on what we'll be doing this afternoon. We obviously heard earlier that we're going to be talking about international religious freedom, which is of a great importance, to all of us, and in a particular way, in terms of Nigeria. This panel will focus on the challenges in Nigeria, and the case study will describe the current status that is in Nigeria and explore what would work best to improve the condition in the church in Nigeria. Archbishop Anayakum will make a presentation for about 20 minutes on the state of the issue in Nigeria, and then Father Okuri will follow that with about 10 minutes as well. And then after that, what will happen is we will have a moment for Q&A, some questions and answers. We want to get finished by 4:15, but about 4 o'clock or 5, we will have Paul Miller, who will present to us some of the key insights related to some questions that I will pose to you later. I think most of us some of us are certainly familiar with Archbishop Anayakum, who is the Archbishop of Abuja in Nigeria, and he comes with a host of, as you see his biography there, a host of credentials here. I'll only mention just a few. He was appointed as auxiliary bishop in 1982, was ordained as the Bishop of Rome in 1983. He was appointed as co-adjutor of Abuja in 1980, and then became the bishop there in 82, and then became an archdiocese in 1984. He had special appointments as a member of the International Theological Commission for the dialogue between Methodist and Roman Catholic International Dialogue Community. He has held many posts, President of the Catholic Bishops' Conference in Nigeria, President of the Association of the Episcopal Conference in West Africa, and the President of the Symposium of the Episcopal Conference of Africa and Madagascar. We also have with us this afternoon Father Okuri, who is the Executive Director of the African Faith and Justice Network and Fellow at the Institute of Policy Research here at Catholic University of America. He was also with the USCCB, coordinator of ethnic ministries, and founded the African Conference of Catholic Clergy and Religious in the United States. Let us welcome them warmly this afternoon. At this time, I'm going to invite Archbishop Anayakum, if he would come forward to make his presentation at this time. Please. And Father Okuri, if you could come here as well. You make your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bishop Ali. I've come the whole way from Nigeria to give this 20 minutes talk. And you wonder what to say within 20 minutes about a question, an issue that is very complex, and you have to decide what to say or what not to say. I prepared a paper which, if I read it, it will take me beyond 20 minutes. I will read parts of it. Luckily, the paper will be made available to you. I was also told to suggest ways I believe that the United States Church could come to the help of Nigeria. I have made a few suggestions towards the end, but I rather prefer to talk about our situation in Nigeria and leave you to see and decide what you think you can do about it. Before I say anything, I just want to summarize what I have to say in this way. The context, the whole idea of this conference is about religious freedom. This particular group is parallel to Cuba and Iraq. I just want to stress what Cardinal Dolan said, that situations differ from one place to the other. There's an ocean of difference between my situation as Archbishop of Abuja and the situation of the Archbishop of Havana and that of the Archbishop of Baghdad. And as far as religious freedom is concerned, as a Nigerian, I live in a nation where everybody, by law, is free. Not only to follow your religion, but the Constitution actually gives us the right to change our religion. Whether this is fully respected in concrete individual cases, that is another matter. And I have mentioned in my text situation where the rights of people have not been sufficiently respected. But that the country as a whole and that the Christians as a whole in Nigeria are under Muslim persecution is not the reality. I don't feel myself persecuted. I speak very frankly and with full responsibility, of course, about my faith in my country. And I do not have to worry what the Muslim people are going to say about it. They can say whatever they like too. So that is what I just wanted to make sure I present to you here. Secondly too, that the Nigerian situation is complex. We are not the biggest African country in terms of extension, but we are the biggest in terms of population. We have 170 million Nigerians. 1 out of every 5 Africans is a Nigerian. So if you have not come to Nigeria, you have not visited Africa yet. And that country is where so many different strands of African culture meet within Nigeria. Besides, there were traditional institutions in different parts of Nigeria which had lived their lives for centuries until we were brought together as one country under the British colonial system. The big problem or the big challenge of any government in Nigeria has been, how do we achieve greater national integration? What does it mean to be Nigerian? And that is still what we are working on. Some of us believe that the project of one Nigeria is a beautiful one, and that we should do all we can to build this great nation, just like your nation, the United States of America, is made up of all kinds of people. There are Nigerians, however, who think that it is a futile effort, and are always talking about their little exclusivistic agendas. But that is what happens practically everywhere. I hope that Bishop will let me know when I have spoken for 15 minutes, so that I know I have only 5 minutes more. Let me start by reading the introduction. Nigeria is in the news. Unfortunately, often not for positive reasons. The most glamorous is the activity of the Islamic terrorist sect called Boko Haram. Boko Haram actually is Hausa for Western education is abomination. But even that name, Boko Haram, is a nickname. The group itself gives their own name, which is in Arabic. Jama'atu Ahlis Sunnah Lil Da'wati wal Jihad, meaning the association of Sunni Muslims for the spread of the faith, Dawah, and for the jihad. Now, jihad can mean anything, but they claim it means the struggle for Islam. Now, that's the name they give themselves. Very few Nigerians even know this Arabic name because we don't speak Arabic in Nigeria. But what we do know is that their activities has completely taken everybody by surprise. There are two areas where the activities of this group is particularly significant. First, the virulence of the attacks. And for the first time in Nigeria, we are witnessing suicide terrorists. People who go and kill themselves in the process of killing others. It's completely un-Nigerian. Remember the young man who had bombs in his pants in Detroit? Our government came out clearly, this cannot be a Nigerian thing. It is not in our culture. Now we know that our people can learn a few things. We are learning everything from everywhere. The second aspect is that this group claims to be acting in the name of God. And as they go around, they shout, Allahu Akbar, which means, yes, even if you say they are terrorist groups, you must admit that they claim to be religious. Now, the mainstream of Islam in Nigeria has rejected them. They have spoken very clearly that these people cannot be good Muslims. They are not Muslims. That's what the leadership of Islam says. But we always tell them, whether you think they are Muslims or not, they are certainly not Catholics. So you must admit that they belong to your house, and that you must therefore take responsibility. If anybody is going to be able to reach out to them in form of any dialogue, it has to be within the house of Islam. And I think as time went on, they began to understand that they really have to admit responsibility, even though they are not sending them. Religious freedom in Nigeria is what I already mentioned. Our constitution makes it very clear. There is even a whole discussion about whether Nigeria is a secular state. Very often we speak of that Nigeria is a secular state, but the Muslims generally don't like that expression. Secular state, they think, give the impression that Nigerian nation is godless, and they don't want to live in a godless nation. The result is that we came out with a formulation in our constitution which simply says the government of Nigeria shall not adopt any religion as state religion. Clear though that statement looks, we now realize that it leaves room for a lot of interpretation because it has not spelled out what does it mean. What would happen that one would say you are going against this aspect of our constitution? What constitutes making a religion a state religion? And when some of our states started to introduce Sharia legislations, we kept telling them that this is against our constitution, but they kept saying that the constitution did not say we cannot have Sharia, it only says we should not have a state religion, and we have not said that we have a state religion. The debate is going on. And note here that despite all we are hearing, the reality on the ground is that in Nigeria, Christians and Muslims are about 50-50. So we are not living in a Muslim nation. 170 million with about 80 million Catholics, Christians, and 80 million Muslims, scattered all over the nation. Certain sections were predominantly Muslims, certain sections predominantly Christian, but there's nowhere in Nigeria where you will find the two religions. We claim to be the greatest Islamo-Christian nation in the world. By that we mean there's no country in the world with so many Christians and so many Muslims living together within the same geographical boundaries, and living together in mutual respect. And we believe, and equality. We believe that the fact that so many of us living together in Nigeria have managed to survive and we have not exploded yet is a feat for which we think we should be congratulated. But apart from that, when you come to Nigeria, we are all there. You will not, unless you see me dressed like this, you don't know whether I'm a Muslim or a Christian. In our schools, in our churches, in the markets, in the offices, we all live together. It's only on Sundays, of course, that you know those who go to church, and on Fridays, those who go to the mosque. But otherwise, we live our lives together. And I think we should not underestimate that fact. Those of us who believe in a good relationship between Christians and Muslims, we build our confidence on this fact on the ground. Many parts of Nigeria, the Christian-Muslim relationship go right inside families. Most of the Yoruba Muslims have Christians within their families. My senior sister is married to a Muslim. My father was not too happy about it. My father was a good Catholic. He wasn't too happy about it, but when a girl wants to go, you can't stop her. She went and married a Muslim. Her children, I made sure I baptized them because they are my nephews. And their father couldn't stop me baptizing my nephew. But it happens like that in many cases. So we have this a situation which you will not see that in Pakistan. You won't see that in Egypt. And I don't think you will even see that in Indonesia. But you will see that in Nigeria and in many other African countries. You go to Senegal, you will find such a thing. If you go to Burkina Faso, Ghana, and so on. This being the case, means then that the Boko Haram that has made so much noise must be considered an anomaly, a very sad anomaly, but anomaly. They have continued to operate. But I must say, things are getting better. The government is gradually learning how to deal with them. So much so now that we are able to even make fun of one another. We have good sense of humor. And I quoted here a text message that I received recently. You know, during the very serious bomb operations of Boko Haram, we keep getting text messages saying the bomb is coming. They said to me, Archbishop, warn all your members that we have it on good authority that the Boko Haram are coming to bomb your church. We kept getting these text messages. We don't know where they come from. And it was creating a lot of panic in the hearts of people. But we are now able to joke over it. And there is this text I put here, which says, and I quote, a bomb just exploded in Kano again. Kano is one of the biggest cities in the north. This time in a cemetery. All the dead bodies ran out of their graves, but no casualty. The Commissioner of Police has asked them to return to their normal spiritual duties without fear. He said, that's Nigeria for you. The message ends with, I hope I have got you smiling. If we can now begin to smile, it is because some tangible progress has been made to respond to the challenge of Boko Haram. And the progress has been made in the area of security response. When these things started, our country just didn't know what to do. We are not used to this kind of terrorism. The security forces knew how to go and fight battles. Soldiers are very good in peacekeeping forces abroad. But when it came to terrorists within our nation, they were completely out of their wits. And the result was that the first attempts, they made mistakes. We had cases of panic action by armed policemen and soldiers killing people at random, to the extent that sometimes the activities of the security agencies sowed far more terror than the activities of the Boko Haram themselves. Even our nation was being accused of going against fundamental human rights because we were dealing too ruthlessly with people. But now we have improved. They have improved. And I think they have learned to do better. We have continued with interfaith contacts On the highest level of our Christian-Muslim apex body called the Nigerian Religious Council, unfortunately we have not succeeded much. But that has not stopped us from moving at different levels. And I gave examples of the efforts some of us are making and to gather Christians and Muslims together. And my experience is that once you reach out to Christian groups that are ready to talk with you, we make a lot of progress. And we have an Abuja Interfaith Peace Building Forum, and the executive secretary of the National Mosque is my counterpart. And I gather Christians, he gathers Muslims, we meet regularly once a month, and we do all kinds of things. We plant peace trees. We've got the women among us also work among the women, the youths are working among the youths. In fact, all these have become things we are getting that have been coming up since this special problem of the Boko Haram. Before we took things for granted. Now we have to really be proactively engaged. And of course, we keep praying. And we believe that we shall come out the better for it. One other point I want to raise. Very often the impression is given that the Boko Haram just goes looking for Christians to kill. It is true that they target Christians, but it is also true that they kill others too, not just Christians. They kill also Muslims. The Eminence Cardinal referred to the Christmas Day bombing. That Christmas Day bombing got wide publicity all over the world. 27 worshippers at St. Teresa's Church were killed on that morning. But the total number of casualties that day were about 42. And we know for sure a list of about 7 Muslims who died in the same bomb. And very pathetically, because of the security situation, we always invited policemen to help to keep order in our churches. On that day, in the Church of St. Teresa's, 2 policemen were sent to us. Both of them were blown to pieces. One of them was a Muslim. And so there was a Muslim on guard, defending a Christian church, getting blown up by a so-called Muslim bomb. Unfortunately, that aspect doesn't come out in the press. And I feel that we should not forget it, so that way we know that we are dealing with a group of criminals ready to kill anybody. We all feel threatened. And I think it's because we now realize we are all feeling threatened that we can all join hands together to do better. Well, in the future, we have to think more of how to improve our dialogue. We have to clarify our constitution and to make sure that we know exactly what can be done, what cannot be done. I have here, we should learn to restrain our mad dogs. And Islam must work and restrain their own mad dogs, and we should restrain our own too, because we do have mad dogs among our Christian folk. We have fanatics too. They may not be carrying bombs around, but the utterances of some preachers, small preachers here and there, can be very belligerent and lead to a lot of problems. And I stated here that in Yoruba, I'm a Yoruba, we always have nice ways of saying things. We don't have a Yoruba word for fanatic, but we have coined one. And the Yoruba word for fanatic is Agbawuri Nesin, meaning somebody who has adopted madness with his faith. So that's what we call fanatics, which means a fanatic is a mad person with his faith. Now we need to, we all need to identify our mad people and sanction them. But the problem is the mad preachers are often not under anybody's control. Like the Boko Haram they are not under any control of the Islamic establishment. And our roadside pastors who say whatever they like don't belong to any church. That means the responsibility now lies with government to deal with a situation that can simply be treated in terms of social order in the society, which is what is happening. But the government has been handicapped because the government itself is weak. But we hope that they will wake up I have something about the international dimension. The Boko Haram has, we believe they have international connections, but not in any strict way, but that they know about the activities of other terrorists elsewhere abroad. It is rumored that some of their leaders actually had combat experience in the terrorist camps. As we know, those terrorist camps in Afghanistan and in Iraq are international, and many Nigerians joined them. But they are not hard facts, we don't have figures. But the way they operate shows that they really have learned quite a few things. And therefore, in order that we could deal with them, we need also to have international relationship. And this is where the role of the United States government comes in. The United States government has shown keen interest in Nigeria's situation, declaring some of their leaders terrorists. The issue of whether the Boko Haram should be declared a terrorist organization is still left there in debate. What does it mean? Talking of international dimension, we receive visits from people, solidarity visits. From the Holy See, Cardinal Turon visited us. And I must say, when he left, he said it was a pleasant surprise. The mood with which he came and the news he heard about Nigeria, what he met on ground was different. And he said he was going home to tell them. I also mentioned a very particular visit from abroad, an interfaith group made up that was formed by the World Council of Churches, led by the Secretary General, and the Jordanian group, the Royal Al-Bayt Institute, and it was led by a cousin of the king. They call him his Royal Highness Prince Ghazi bin Muhammad. They came to Nigeria as an interfaith group to visit us. I found it very interesting because it was the first time we had an interfaith, international body coming to see what is happening in Nigeria. I'm afraid their visit was very challenging. It was not easy to arrange. And when we visited places, the results we are getting showed how complex our situation is. I referred to our difficulties because I didn't want anybody to feel that everything is okay in Nigeria, no problem. We have problems. And there are many parts of Nigeria where Christians do have problems. We know that it is not easy, it's not everywhere that a bishop can easily apply for land for church and get it given to him. Many parts of the north, they still are reluctant to recognize the equal footing of Christianity with Islam. But this is a matter of the refusal to obey our laws. It is not that the law actually supports them in doing this. And we are continuing the struggle, like they say, Aluta, continue. And it is, I want to thank the organizers for bringing me here. If there is room for discussion later, maybe I might be able to explain more. Have I exceeded my time?
You have much. Thank you so very much. Presentation on a more personal level as to the situation in Nigeria. At this time, I'd like to invite Father Kure for his presentation.
Good evening. Yes, I'd like to start by acknowledging what the Archbishop said, that it is true that Muslims and Christians live together in Nigeria, they intermarry. There is a relationship between the two groups, and freedom of worship is guaranteed in such that there are public holidays for Easter, for Christmas, for Good Friday. They are all national public holidays. There is also there is something that is common, that this is more common in terms of the intermarriage. It's more common in the South, as the Archbishop indicated. There is, however, an underlying current in Nigeria that we kind of create a divide mentally, ideologically between the North and the South. And There are certain practices and constitutional provisions that enable some states, especially in the north, to create an environment that makes religious freedom difficult. So if I take it from the standpoint of religious freedom understood as freedom to practice one's faith openly and freely without overt or covert restrictions, then this freedom is basically hampered in certain areas of Nigeria. So let me give a context why that is so. A context that has contributed to this mental and, I dare say, ideological divide between the southern part of the country and the northern part of the country. As the Archbishop said, we have, the Christians are like half and half between Muslims and Christians. Yet, there is a heavy concentration of Muslims in the far north of the country and Christians in the deep south. So Nigeria, as we know it, is an amalgam of different nation states. And in the process, in 1914, these two entities were brought together. And so from that standpoint, there is what I may call the South-North mentality that is rooted in Nigeria's political culture. When these two areas were brought together, they operated two different systems of government. There was the direct rule in the southern part of the country and indirect rule in the northern part of the country. So what happened in the south was that the colonial rulers were more intimately involved in the governing apparatus in the south. In the north, however, because of two things: one, the feudal system that existed; secondly, the Islamic presence. The colonial rulers decided to use the Muslim elite as surrogates for colonization, which means they governed through Muslim leaders. That's why they called indirect rule. So these leaders were the go-between between the people and the colonial rulers in terms of collecting taxes, maintaining law and order. So over time, between 1914 and by 1960, when Nigeria achieved independence, you had entrenched in this one nation, a system on the one hand that allowed the northern political elites to see themselves as legitimate rulers of the country. And in fact, when you look at the fact that Islam doesn't make a wall of separation between the state and religion, where religion is so pervasive, it dictates the way of life, commerce, ritual observances and all of that, then the whole interweaving of the political elite with the political apparatus make them come to see Christians, if you might, as intruders, and themselves as the rightful heirs to governance. Although this is not said out loudly, it does create an atmosphere that has fermented throughout the time we've been here. So, in a way, also the introduction of the Sharia court, which the Archbishop mentioned, the registration of Nigeria in the Organization of Islamic Conference, and sometimes the government subsidy to Muslim pilgrims to Mecca. When you bring all of that together, there are certain elements within the Islamic community that think that Nigeria is, quote, an Islamic country. It's not official, it's not taught, but this is what the mentality is among certain Muslims. So in a way, one could say that Boko Haram is a blessing. That's an awful thing to say. Why do I say that? Because in some ways they're acting out what was lying there, an undercurrent. And it's bringing to light what is there, and it might be, if appropriately handled, it might be a way for us to resolve this problem once and for all, and to move on with a united country. Also, in Islam, since there is no central magisterium, anybody can interpret the Quran anywhere and act with it, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. There is also in Nigeria a linkage of Western values to Christianity. They see that. So when the fanatic Muslim sees corruption, sees the divide between the rich and the poor, and sees how the politicians act with impunity, in their mind, these are Western values. And also there's a connection between the West and Christianity. We are all too familiar with that, whether it be the issue in Baghdad, where because the US forces occupied the Pontifical College, they concluded that the forces were in cahoots with the Christians. Or the case, the sad case in Libya that the Cardinal referred to earlier in the day. So that linkage is there. And the point is, what can we do? Let me just quickly say that. What can we do? I think that it would be good to do what the Muslims do, namely a strict solidarity with our brothers. We need to find ways to supporting our brothers and sisters in persecuted areas of the world. Muslims are very good at that. We are actually not exactly that way. And I think we would do better to speak out more forcefully against the US militarization of international assistance. Very often we find a situation where there is a readiness to send the military to solve problems. It's good the US has done tremendous good, nobody denies that. It's done tremendous given tremendous assistance to many nations, Nigeria included. But it's also important to try to understand the culture and what I may call the moral code, indigenous moral code of the country. Let me strike out a case here in point, where many Muslims try to link Christianity with the West and so carry that antagonism into the Christian arena. For example, earlier in the year, the Nigerian Congress phoned to ban same-sex marriage. And the US and the UK jumped on board and said they're going to deny Nigeria assistance, they're going to stop tourists going into Nigeria until Nigeria repents and repeal that law. That kind of action plays into Muslim fanatics who said, oh, look at the West and Christianity, they're trying to spoil our country. So it is important that we try to understand fully what the indigenous political culture is and the moral code, and most so to help in building up civil society organizations and support the work of the church who try to dialogue with these fanatics.
Thank you so very much. At this time, we will take the panel will take questions. We have until about 4 o'clock, a little maybe 5 after 4, where Paul Miller will have a few questions that he will sum up actually at 4:30. And these are the questions of what is the current situation of the religious freedom in Nigeria, what would work best in Nigeria to improve religious freedom conditions, and what can the church and faith-based organizations do to defend and advance religious freedom in Nigeria? What can Congress or the administration do? So we will do that at about 5 after. So we have a few moments for some questions for our panelists, and they will do this right now. So, yes.
converter retreat from Jubilee campaign. Earlier this year in February, I visited Nigeria and talked with some pastors. I actually personally spoke with the pastor in Kano. And I understand, sir, that in Abuja you don't feel persecuted, but the reports that we get and the communications that I have with people in the north indicate that churches and Christians and church leaders above Abuja do feel persecuted, that they have a consistent and ongoing fear for their lives, and that it takes acts of great personal courage to come to church and to open the doors on Sunday morning. So I understand that the point that you're trying to make is that not all of Nigeria is that bad. That is indeed the point that you're trying to make. But my understanding is that there are definitely parts of Nigeria where that persecution is as real and as threatening as anywhere in the world. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the communications we've received from the people that I personally talked to. So.
When you have the full text, you will notice that I did mention that there are places where the lingering Islamic state mentality, we should not forget that, following on the historical analysis, the whole of the north was a caliphate, meaning an Islamic empire under the Sultan of Sokoto, and each city had an emir whose duty was to promote Islam. And this situation grew and developed over at least 70 years before the British came. In fact, 80 years. And when the British came, they met this organization on ground. As different from the South, where each tribe had its own little kinglets and kingdoms. It was easy for the British colonial regime to deal with the system in the north, the system of the Emirates, which was also closely linked with Islam. Now, a lot has happened in Nigeria between 1820, 1830, which was the beginning of the jihad of Usman and Fodio, and 1914, which is the amalgamation of Nigeria, and 1960, which is the independence of Nigeria. What has happened there is, especially since 1960, because between 1914 and 1960, there was this indirect rule situation where there was an agreement, gentleman's agreement between Britain and the Muslim rulers. There is no doubt that the British government, British colonial rule in Nigeria favored and respected the Islamic rulers. They were considered high level. They were literate. They didn't speak English, but they wrote Arabic. Before the British came, they had diplomatic relations with Muslim nations. And many Muslims today still look back on that golden age and believe that the British came to disorganize a wonderful arrangement. But unfortunately, they have to admit to that we are now in a united Nigeria, and a lot has happened between 1960 and now. All the upheavals we find in Nigeria, in my own opinion, is simply how do you bring together these different strains within one country and the construction of a constitution that will be valid for everybody. This is why there are still people in the north who consider Christianity as, at best, a foreign element within their society. And the British colonial regime kept the Christians mostly from the south in little ghettos called Sabongi, where they enjoyed the freedom of religion. And they got land, but they kept intact the Muslim establishment. Who suffered most? The indigenous of the north who wanted to be Christians. They are the ones who I can say and I will confirm are under serious persecution. His brothers who live in Kano can go back home to Akwa Ibom State, and they do. But the native Kano indigenes who decide to become Christians are stuck with a community that believes Christianity doesn't belong here. That is why you get what you can consider a sense of persecution. But I mean, this is Christianity, and we are working on it. There's a bishop in Kano, a Catholic bishop in Kano. We are talking about the problems on the ground. Right now we have on hand the question of land for church. That's a very good example. Mosques can spring up anywhere, and nobody asks for permission to build a mosque. But to build a church, they ask you for permission. Why? Because you don't need permission for a mosque. This is a Muslim area. To build a church, you must get permission. And this is completely contrary to the Nigerian Constitution. According to the Nigerian Constitution, Islam has no any special privileges over Christianity. What we are not doing, and I always tell all those from every time I hear this, more or less what Father said, why Muslims generally in Nigeria are very serious about their religion. I'm not sure I can say the same about Christians. When you tell stories of persecution to Nigerian politicians, it's like you are pouring water on the dog's back. It's not an issue. In the time when Sharia law was being introduced in the north, much of the opposition and noise came from Christian religious leaders, politicians in the houses of assembly and the Senate, who should call them to order, did not want to disturb their relationship with Muslim politicians. So I make it clear, I don't want to give the impression that everywhere in Nigeria there is no problem. What I would say is that to be a good Christian, in most places, costs effort. And there are many Christians are really giving witness to their faith. They are ready to suffer what we call persecution, but more they suffer liabilities to be a Christian. You don't get you don't get your promotion in time. You lose a few things here that you should be getting. But many Christians say they don't care, but nobody is going to make me change my religion. They do it so they can become a Muslim and say, no, I will become a Muslim, I will be a Christian.
Thank you, Archbishop. I'm sure we have time for a couple more questions. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and Father, for bringing me back. Good memory when I was with you for a few years. So I'm speaking after many years that I left Nigeria, 14. And I thank you for the information that you sent about the actual situation. You mentioned about, the 50-50 presence of Muslims and Christians. I wonder if, especially in the north of Nigeria, the so-called Muslim north of Nigeria, in fact, there is not quite an important proportion of still animists. I would say that it's only by chance that the attacks, that the terrorist attack of Boko Haram happened in Jos, for example, where, in almost central north of Nigeria, where since already a few years, the majority are Christians. And the church in the north of Nigeria is growing very much. The new diocese that have been established there, and there is not the case that those links of international terrorism, they have also a strategy. Seeing that the growing of the Christianity in the north of Nigeria can be so quickly developed that at a certain moment they are losing that predominance also in the north of Nigeria. The same thing happened in Kaduna, it seems to me. So that probably the attack is in order to discourage this situation is evolving in favor of developing of the Christianity in the north.
Yes, Your Excellency, that's a good observation. In many ways, when there is an opportunity for census, there is always an opposition from the north, you know. And I think also some of the instances where people in the north have been counted as Muslims also is because of this principle that where the king is, or the religion of the king is the religion of the people. So in the past, there have been many people who have counted as Muslims who fall into the category you just described.
Sister.
I think it's good to note, the Nuncio knows what he's talking about because he was the Nuncio in Nigeria. And I'm glad you mentioned the presence of people in the north who are neither Christians or Muslims, a big number of them. I tried to refer to them. With most of them, anybody in the north now who didn't agree to become Muslim normally gravitate to his Christianity. Most of them want to be Christians, but the society puts restriction on their free adoption of Christianity. Let's not forget that the British colonial policy was based on a truce. Britain never really conquered the north. They entered into a gentleman's agreement. The north said, Britain, what do you want? You want Nigeria to be part of your empire? Okay. But don't touch our religion, don't touch our customs. And the British said, we have no problem with your religion, we have no problem with your culture. And it meant that all through the colonial era, missionaries had to get permission from the Muslim rulers for any evangelization activity. So wherever the emir says, we are Muslims here, Christian missionaries were forbidden to go. In other words, it was understood that Christians should not preach to convert Muslims. Now, there are many Muslims in the north who still feel that way. And so when you see what the Nuncio is saying, many Christians being converted, and we who are Nigerian Christians, bishops, we go to the villages and go and preach to people because we are not party to any gentleman's agreement with the British, and people begin to become Christians. The Muslim leaders gradually see all around them people becoming Christians. Now, whether they react, whether they are the ones who are sending Boko Haram to cause confusion, I don't know. What I do know, though, is that the activities of Boko Haram, on the contrary, will not stop this Christianization of the North. It will indeed give it more impetus. And we are waiting and we are watching.
I think we have one more.
I wonder if the recent initiative from the Melinda Gates and the Bill Foundation and International Planned Parenthood, which is really attacking both Christian and Muslim communities in terms of wanting abortion to be more and more accepted and attacking natural methods of family planning, insisting on commodifying women. Has that had any reaction on the ground in either community?
I've worked from both. Actually, last week, interestingly enough, it was the Nigerian Catholic Medical Association who packaged a report on this issue. We're talking of a total of about 70 million US dollars that Mr. Gates and his wife have decided to give to the Nigerian government, specifically to bring in loads and loads of condoms and implants and other. The grants specified for this purpose. And interestingly, it was the Minister of State for Health who told the Senate that this money is coming also with a little bit more addition from DFID, that's the British and when this was made known to us, and that medical association and other people put it on the press, everybody's talking about it now. And we're asking our government, if these people really want to help us, let them give us money for malaria for this century, and not give us money for condoms. I do not know what's going to be the result. Obviously, there are many people in government who are looking forward to collect this money. The only thing with Nigeria is that the millions of dollars will come, and less than half of it will go for condoms. The rest will be distributed among the big many governments. You know? But it is a matter that is of great concern to us. We don't really know why there are these groups, and there are Americans who keep giving us, who give us freely these generous donations for things which we don't need. We are talking about how does it relate to Christian Muslim. Luckily, these are one of those areas where Christians and Muslims are joining hands.
Exactly.
We join hands, and now we are able to go together with our Christian Muslim groups. We intend, actually before I left, we already agreed that we're going to stage a sitting at the National Assembly and tell them that they should ask for food and not for condoms.
Thank you so very much, Archbishop and Father McClure. At this time, I think what we would do, because we have about 5 minutes, at 4:15 we will take a break, and we'll be back over in the other room at 4:30. But before that, I'm going to ask Paul Miller if he would come forward. And again, the 3 questions are: what is the current situation of the religious freedom in Nigeria? What will work best in Nigeria to improve religious freedom conditions? And what can the church and faith-based organizations do to defend and advance religious freedom in Nigeria? What can Congress or the administration do? Paul, come on.
Well, thank you, Bishop Polly, and thank you, Your Grace, Archbishop and Father Okuri. It would take the blessing of all the bishops in this assembly for me to summarize the complex description of the situation and the many layers. And I am a neophyte in Nigeria, and we've been there only a couple times. But it was rich, and I will certainly try to distill as best I can in a few minutes. But I did want to ask perhaps a little bit more about what to do. And the what to do questions were about what would work best in the country to improve religious freedom conditions, what can church and faith-based organizations do, and what can Congress, we are in Washington, what can Congress and administration do? And what I heard, and this is where I'm asking for your reaction, Your Grace and Father Okuri, what I heard is that in Nigeria you are working on many levels. You are working, for instance, on interreligious councils and peace-building forums. You are working as well in terms of trying to express solidarity. You want to clarify the Constitution at a much higher level, that there is no state religion, but what does it mean that Sharia law can occur in some parts of the country. So those were some of the things I heard in the country. Maybe I left some out. And what I heard from outside, I heard, Your Grace, I heard you talk about solidarity visits, interfaith and ecumenical solidarity visits. I also heard from Father Okuri that the U.S. government also and other governments and other people, they need to respect the local moral code, because that can make the situation worse. I heard also that the U.S. government provides significant aid, but the perception of militarization of aid would actually exacerbate the situation. Your Grace, you mentioned, but I don't think you answered the question, or I did not hear it. Should Boko Haram be designated a terrorist organization? I heard that as a question to be considered. So those are some of the things that I heard, and I'm asking for your clarification so I don't misrepresent you. What are the things that you are doing and what others can do in Nigeria, and what can we hear internationally? And again, the U.S. government and Congress, what can we do to support the cause of religious freedom in Nigeria?
We have about 5 minutes, and that's going to be our break time. So,
okay. Yeah, let me start by talking about the last point you made. I know the U.S. Bishop had a large platform and a loud microphone, you know. So it's something that when it comes to advocating for Nigeria, given the history and the strength of the USCCB, that's something the bishops can do. In terms of militarization of assistance, African Faith and Justice Network, and other groups, we had sent on May 17th, sent a letter to the Secretary of State not to designate Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization, because that's a very strict, have legal consequences here in the United States. It doesn't allow other NGOs to mediate, and because they will be seen as terrorist participants, So also, if that can be pushed on, see, Boko Haram, for me, it's really an internal problem. In fact, that's what we told the Secretary of State. The climate of impunity in Nigeria, the lack of the rule of law, extrajudicial killings by the police, and the way politicians act with impunity allow a situation, an organization like Boko Haram to thrive in the country. So if the U.S. government, the Secretary of State can whack his finger at Nigeria to, quote, be accountable and transparent and apply the rule of law, that will help Nigeria more than these other kinds of help.
To come directly to your question, if you have my book paper, page 10, I mentioned there that we heard in Nigeria that the United States government had declared 3 leaders of Boko Haram as terrorists. Now I add here, but most people in Nigeria do not know what this means in concrete fact. What does this declaration mean? Now, there are suggestions and even appeals in some quarters that the Boko Haram itself should be designated a terrorist organization. Again, most Nigerians will want to know what will be the practical implications, if any, of such a declaration. If it will mean giving the US or any foreign nation for that matter any form of license to intervene directly in the internal security of our nation, most Nigerians will certainly oppose it. Our government is weak and often overwhelmed, but Nigeria is still functioning. We are not in a failed state. I don't know whether that helps you.
Well, thank you so very much, Archbishop Anaya and Father Akuri. Thank you for your